Cathedral Quarter is a heritage-led regeneration scheme funded by Historic England. The council bid for £1.9 million of funding. We were one of around 62 local authorities who bid for funding and were successful with it. £1.9 million was one of the largest pots of money that you could get and had the sort of largest programme of work to deliver with that funding. The project consisted of working with historic buildings to basically regenerate the high street. Because it was Historic England funded, obviously, it was more about rejuvenating the high street through its heritage. We outlined Westgate Street and the lanes and links off it as the zone that we felt had considerable heritage that was underused, underappreciated, but highly significant.
So we wanted to make sure that from a strategic perspective, that people wanted to visit here, wanted to look, and if we could spend money and get landlords to spend money on making their shop fronts better, making the front of the building look better. The odd thing about Gloucester as a city centre is it's not in the city centre. It's out on the northwest of the city, and most of the residential occupation of the city is down to the south or out to the east or to the northeast. There's not very much in the way of residential occupation in the city centre. So we needed to get people from all around the city to come and visit as well. Not only to visit, not only to come to the shops, but also to consider moving into this area to live here.
I think it was a combination of opportunities and risk, I guess. Opportunities, it's a fantastic historic street. It's got a very distinct identity. I think with the various different objectives, the tangible one is about improving buildings, frankly, and I think that's where Historic England were mainly coming from, putting funding and resource into the physical fabric, which is perfectly laudable because there's some fantastic stock down that street. I think the sort of also ran objectives, the sort of the secondary level, were about engaging the public and getting that sense of ownership of regeneration, really getting local people to appreciate the place, but also to buy into the future of the place.
Walking down Westgate Street, it felt a bit tired and a bit run down, but for somebody like me interested in historic buildings, you could see there was a lot of real interest behind that sort of shabby facade.
Westgate Street has the largest number of listed buildings within the city centre. It was important, we felt, that these listed buildings had a bit more care and attention. Some of them are Grade 1 listed and Grade 2 star listed, which means that they're in the top 5% of historic buildings in the country. We funded 17 buildings altogether. A vast majority of those were vacant floor space related projects, so where buildings were being underused or in poor condition or required greater accessibility. An example of that would be number 14, the old Meek shoe shop, probably the largest project that we funded. It needed work to the exterior, to the roof, to the facade, repointing, and it also required a new shop front, which was another strand that we tried to push within the project. On the inside and the interior of that building, it had an amazing plaster ceiling that needed some restoration, so that was a really nice addition to that project, that we could try and get that significant plaster ceiling back into good condition.
Stage 3 of the operation is to put on the top coat of render. And this is quite a coarse mix with pigment in it to give it a little bit more depth in colour. Before putting it on, we wet the whole surface of the backing coat up, and then also put on a sort of like a milky wash of lime to give it a little bit more key. After that has gone off, or just about going off on the top coat, we then start to put our lime wash on, which is sort of quite a thin wash to start with, but as we go through it, it gets thicker. We apply about 4 or 5 coats, and in the last coat we put in a little bit of casein, which acts as a binder and gives it a little bit more life.
And the upper floors had been sitting vacant. Those upper floors were converted into flats. That's a real goal of the project, was to try and get more upper floors into use as residential, because we want more people to be living in the high street, and then if they're living here, they're going to be using the local shops and the local services and bringing more regeneration into the economy.
If you look at the colours of the facade now, we started out with a dirty white and rotten black timber frontage, which was really feeling its age. If you look at it now, through inspirational, I think, choices of colours, but the colours really stand out. And it's the thing everybody knows. Everybody knows now that the folk is, oh, that beautiful coloured building down Westgate Street.
So we're in the shop, we're having a look at some of the historic elements of this shop that has sort of how it's evolved historically. And we start off with the timber framed building, which was part of the Fleece complex. And if we look up at the ceiling here, we've got some really interesting 17th century plasterwork that is underlying all the later pieces of plaster and wallpaper and whatever. And then that flows into the timber frame over here, which, you know, effectively was the original part of the building. And what's really interesting is in the Georgian period, when they built this brickwork in underneath the timber frame, they used the medieval horizontal struts, or the horizontal stud-work, as part of the brickwork, you know, to help support that wall. So there's that lovely sort of reuse of the building as you go forward.
We've worked on 8 buildings that have had new shop fronts or works to their facades. Mister's Cafe and number 17 are my personal favourites. They had shop fronts that were really not in keeping with the historic nature of the building and the architecture of that building. So we had smaller grants for people who didn't want to have a new shop front per se, but wanted to do some repairs, repainting. Fascia signage is actually quite a key thing for the character of an historic building. If you have inappropriate fascia signage that's made of plastic or has bright neon lights on it, it really doesn't say, I'm a historic building. So working with a variety of different kinds of shopfront grants was a lot of opportunities for people who wouldn't be able to afford necessarily to have a new shopfront to just do that work that would recreate the historic feel and the historic character that we were looking for.
I was asked by the Cathedral Quarter to come and paint the fascia of the Golden Fleece Hotel. It's a mural that talks about the history of the building and its incantations since the 12th century and its various owners and all of its uses.
The lovely new frontage that along the buildings along Westgate Street have made an awful lot of difference, especially on the folk. I think getting people's acknowledgement that, you know, Tudor buildings aren't just black and white. Victorian buildings aren't black and white. They had colour. They were colour on the inside and outside, which again brings more personality back into the high street. So there's the frontage, the sign writing has gone down remarkably well, especially with the businesses that have accepted it. And I think it makes a great difference on that side of things.
So I still walk down Westgate Street at least twice a day, and the thing that I really like to see are the shopfront improvements where these sort of inappropriate and maybe low quality mid-20th century shopfronts were getting a bit tired, and seeing what they've been replaced with, sort of traditional timber construction, historic paint schemes.
It was lovely to work on this project because we did uncover some amazing things that we didn't expect to find. When working on the Dick Whittington, we found timber beams in the ground floor, had some colour on them from the 15th century and the 16th century. Those painted schemes are quite rare to uncover. Also, in the folk of Gloucester, we found similar paint residues and an amazing wall painting that dates from Tudor period, which we knew was there because it had been covered over in previous years but had been forgotten about, which was uncovered when the workmen started using that particular room. Also at number 39, Westgate Street, we found an amazing wall painting there dating from the early 1500s, which depicts pomegranates, which is a Catherine of Aragon sort of symbol, so we can sort of date it fairly well from that. We had Historic England working with us, and they found a paint expert who could come along and help us date those murals and look at the sort of painted schemes and analyse them for us and tell us a bit more about them. We knew there were undercrofts under some of the buildings, and we knew that they were stone, and we knew that they were quite significant in terms of their date. But the one underneath the Mark Blake hairdressers building, we were able to get into there and have a look at that. And with Historic England researchers, we were able to look at that and date that to around a similar time as the well-known undercroft that's under the Fleece. And it's also meant that working with Historic England again, we have been able to rewrite a lot of the listing descriptions for some of these buildings to include what's been uncovered and to include the things that we've found. So, for example, the Fleece, working again with Historic England, we've had dendrochronological dating done of the timbers. This building that I'm sitting in now, the Westgate Range, we now know that that's contemporary with the Great Inn, which sits over the Norman Undercroft. It was previously thought to be a later addition and is Grade 2 listed at the moment. But currently we're discussing with Historic England whether, due to that new information, the fact that it's built at the same time, from the same timbers even, as the Great Inn, that actually it should have its grading uplifted to Grade 1. So we're currently waiting to see if that happens, but it's quite likely that it will. Westgate Street's a fascinating place. It has an amazing history. Alongside all the beautiful buildings and the significant buildings, we have some amazing stories about people.
Because something I found out quite quickly is that there are a lot of really great stories that have happened here, and putting that at the forefront of the social media, it generated a lot of interest, I think, in the account, so that when we then came to ask people for things, to fill in a survey or turn up to an engagement event, that positive relationship was already there.
We have made new information boards. We've put a mouse trail into the street which shows the Beatrix Potter story. People can follow that trail and find 10 mice from the book. We've also put some information about these characters on the new benches and seating that's been put into the street. And then finally, those buildings that I've talked about in the middle of the street that were lost in the past, we've now put plaques on those outlines to explain what those buildings were. Most people don't even know the outlines are there, but if they do see those black outlines, they can now read what that building was in that position and find out a little bit more about it. Part of the physical works to the street we decided could include public realm improvements, and Westgate Street, whilst it wasn't terrible, generally people wanted more greenery. There's no greenery, there's no trees, no planting, not enough places to sit. Our project focused on putting new planters and seating in and trees, creating some more biodiverse environment. Hopefully in the future we'll see trees planted in the ground, but this is a bit of a stepping stone for Westgate Street.
Getting the new planters and the furniture in that are different to other places in the city, giving that street its own personality. And the amount of comments I've had about the little bits of information on the benches and also on the panelling on the floor, the amount of people I've seen stopping and reading it and going, okay, it's working. It's actually educating people who are coming down here about more about the heritage of the space.
As part of the community engagement project, we ran an oral history project called Westgate Stories. We felt it was very important that the local community felt part of the project from early days, and we wanted to collect their memories and stories of the street and really have them input to it and feel like they were part of it. We appointed a lady called Marsha Omani, and she ran several sessions to sort of get people to come in and talk to her about what they remembered about the street, and to bring in their photographs, to bring in any documents they might have had, and really tell us what life was like back when they remembered living here. And we had some great responses, and we've produced a little booklet from that, which is really lovely. The key themes that seem to have come out of it are people's memories of the floods back in the 40s, how high they were and how they came up as far as St Nicholas Church. A lady remembered going to a wedding and they had to arrive to the church in a boat. We have people talking about elvers and how they used to fish in the river, in the Severn, sell them to the local pubs, and Cafe Roma, how that was a real focal point, and it was kind of a bit unusual when it first opened as an Italian cafe where you could get your first frothy coffee in Gloucester. So lots of different stories that people could tell and memories, which was really lovely to record and keep for posterity. Our cultural programme was run by the Culture Trust, who took on Striker Light Theatre Company to work with the local residents. They do a very sort of bottom-up approach. So rather than have a programme of events that we invite people to get involved with, it was more a case of we appoint some artists in residence and a community producer, very importantly. Katrina was the community producer who's a local resident, and she worked with these artists to kind of involve the people who live locally.
So my name's Katrina McGonagall, and I was one of the producers in the Hussars project.
I'm Amy Freeman. I'm a freelance community artist, and I was one of the artists in residence.
I suppose it's about like connecting people, really.
In a bridge.
With different organisations. So I connected with the Cathedral and people in Westgate Street and the residents.
Working with the artist Marcello, they decided to put on an event which they called a community takeover, and as part of that they started working on a huge piece of art called the Stars of Westgate.
Where the star idea came from?
Yeah, Marcello. I think he was looking through his phone, and then you know the stars in Hollywood were on the floor,
yes, that's where
and he
it came
looked,
from.
this is what we could do, stars.
Instead of the stars' names on
Stick it at
the
the
ground,
front.
you know, the stars.
We decided that we wanted to put on some quite large scale events on the street, and early on we decided to put together an event called Interactive Archaeology.
Interactive archaeology ideas, the chalk paintings on the streets. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but they really did engage lots of residents when they were first put out onto Westgate Street. And I've still got pictures on my phone of watching people pretending to be entering those areas, those subterranean areas. They're really, really lovely pictures, and such a great idea. And I know that they also attracted other people in different means. They have paintings here inside this building, a number of different ways of engaging with the public, and I think they were very successful, and residents themselves were very enthusiastic about getting involved.
We are now 5 days in to our historic Gloucester in Lego displays being shown to the public, and it's been a really big success, we think. This is a joint project between the Civic Trust of the Folk and the City Council's Cathedral Quarter project, and we've had a great number of people coming in to look at the displays, to learn about the history of the city, to have a go with the Lego themselves, and hopefully they will really enjoy it.
Another event we've worked on with the community is something called Windows Through Time. We wanted to show everyone that the street has architecture from all different periods. We created a set of windows, huge windows that were hung from the catenary wires above the street. An artist locally called Jack Wimperis works with light, and he created the windows and then lit them, and then also lit the architecture of the street from the side so he could really enhance sort of decorative features of the buildings. And we ran a trail alongside that so that people could walk the street and try and find the different windows from the different periods in each building. And that was a really lovely event, and tied in with the City Council's Bright Nights in the winter months when it's dark in the evenings. It was a really lovely event. We have also run recently an event with the Gloucestershire Family History Society. They've done a lot of research into the past residents of Westgate Street, looking at the archives, looking at trade directories, looking at the Lanterney Terrier, which talks about who rented and who owned buildings right back to the 12th century, really. We also have St Nicholas Church at the bottom of the street, which is currently empty and looking for new uses, and we thought it'd be great to draw attention to that building by putting a congregation back in there made up of people from throughout the ages.
Conodix.
And what did you do here?
I did like a silversmith one.
Which one's that then? Show me.
Over here. I made this one. He's called William.
And are you a student in Gloucester?
No, I'm a student at the Cinderford campus.
Okay.
But part of the Gloucester College, yeah.
Okay, do you enjoy it?
Yeah, I enjoy it, yeah.
Excellent work.
This is like the big bit here is like the laces, and then in the laces we've done like the process of making the boots and like the timeline of the boots that when he was around, and the background's just like Victorian wallpaper to fill it in, and that's the date he was born, with stuff from the Victorian era.
Brilliant.
Biggest legacy of the project really is going to be the Cathedral Quarter branding.
That branding has given a bit more of a personality to this quarter of the city, and I really think that should be kept on. It's the colours, it's the badge for that area, and it does show. People think Cathedral Quarter, they think independence, and we are very blessed that this area is mainly independence, bar 2 or 3, but they are a substantial independence that love that part of the city. So I think that's been wonderful.
I think finding the wall painting in number 39 really has to be the highlight, because it's a beautiful wall painting. It's quite extensive. It was behind a staircase that was removed, so it would never have been found if we hadn't have created the 2 flats in that building. And the joyous thing about it is that people can go and see it, because it's an Airbnb.
I think coming together as a whole, a holistic view, I think if you'd ignored some of it, perhaps it would look poor, but by doing it as a holistic project, I think it delivers success in that regard.
I still live in the area, I walk through it all the time, I work here, I get my lunch here, and it does make me proud to see the improvements that have been made, and it's really satisfying to have been involved in a project that has had an impact that you can see.
It's the spirit of Westgate, and it is here. The spirit is in the stones of the street and the bones of its people. It is born of the seeds of 2 millennia of lives lived out here. The sung and unsung, the famed and forgotten, some of them angels and some of them rotten, all of them Westgate. A thread from the past that stretches away, a spiralling helix of raw DNA, the genetic code of the spirit of place. And all of us here, at the end of the day, are more bit players in a random, unconscious, unravelling play named Westgate.